The movie begins with a little boy and his mother entering their house. At this time, a man is resting on the branches of a tree with a glass of wine and picnic items. The curious man then notices a woman undressing in her upstairs room. The scene is interrupted when a little boy enters the mother's room. Annoyed, the man calls the house phone and the boy answers. The man suggests that the boy leave his mother's room, but at that moment the woman notices a man in a tree. The boy fires a slingshot and hits the man, causing him to fall from the tree. A few moments later, when the man opens his eyes, he finds that he is in hell. A man in a cloak with white face paint, who turns out to be a guard, approaches him and assures him that he is the clumsy man they have been waiting for. Later, a huge black bird comes after the man and chases him away along with other evil souls. Inside the castle is a huge figure known as Satan. We are then introduced to Nicky, Satan's youngest and cutest son, who listens to heavy metal music. His father has two other sons, Adrian and Cassius, respectively, the former being the more intelligent and the latter the stronger. Nicky is an awkward boy with an emo facial expression and acute paralysis because his brother hit him in the face with a shovel as a child. On that day, the father summons his three sons to inform them that since he is turning 10,000 years as king of hell, it is time to decide who will sit on the throne. Upon reflection, however, the father decides that he will rule hell alone for the next few years, as his sons are not yet ready. Cassius and Adrian, however, are furious at this decision. Nicky, on the other hand, supports his father. Later, a sports broadcaster begs Satan to return among the living to the Super Bowl in exchange for eternal damnation of his soul, but Satan refuses. Meanwhile, Adrian and Cassius discuss going to Earth and destroying as many souls as possible. They bridge over the lava falls, but this is a bad idea as the lava falls freeze and prevent new evil souls from entering hell, causing pandemonium and Satan's degeneration. Later, the father instructs his youngest son Nicky to travel to Earth and force his brothers to drink the liquid contained in the flask, which can trap them. However, after arriving on Earth, Nicky is hit by a train and returns to hell. After this scene, he returns to Earth again, where he meets his father's friend, a bulldog named Mr. Beefy. Mr. Beefy teaches Nicky what he needs to do to adapt on Earth. Outside, they encounter a blind man who runs away when Nicky approaches him. Since Nicky is cold and hungry, Mr. Beefy buys him a bucket of hot fried chicken and a jacket. After a few minutes, Nicky starts to run and gets hit by a car. After returning to Earth, Mr. Beefy informs Nicky that he has lost the money he had set aside to buy a nice apartment. In reality, Mr. Beefy spent it on women and beer. Thus, Nicky is forced to share an apartment with his neighbor, a theater actor. When night falls, the man is awakened by Nicky's constant growling from his snoring. The next day, the action shifts to a priest who behaves strangely, going against God and pointing out the wrong sides of every citizen's problems. Soon the priest and the black mayor take the stage to convince everyone that God has done nothing to help people. The two are actually brothers Adrian and Cassius, who have escaped from hell to do evil on Earth. While all this is going on, Nicky continues his search for his brothers. He asks everyone around him to drink from the flask, thinking they are his brothers. Unfortunately, Nicky ends up in hell minutes after making the bear drink from the flask. Exhausted by the chase, he falls asleep on a massive boulder and snores loudly. At that moment, a stranger approaches him and steals a flask. Two long-haired men witness the theft and wake Nicky up. In a rage, he begins spitting flames. Eventually, Nicky discovers that the thief is trying to sell the flask on the street. Nicky tries to scare him with his burning eyes, but the robber mocks him with playful facial expressions. A girl named Valerie warns the robber that she will call the police. Afterward, Valerie invites Nicky to eat ice cream with her. On the other hand, the Earth is in total disarray. All the kids are doing is causing debauchery and drinking alcohol. There are gangsters on the streets, and Adrian is just happily enjoying himself. At one point, Adrian instantly recognizes Nicky on the street and uses his power to manipulate his mind. Nicky begins to insult Valerie in the worst ways imaginable. As a result, Valerie walks away insulted. Based on all of the above, we can assume that Nicky has a huge reserve of power that he is about to unleash. After all, he is a descendant of the devil himself. Despite this, he hesitates to fully unleash his innate abilities for fear of ruining humanity. Later, as Nicky watches a crazy basketball game, he gets the suspicion that his brothers were the instigators of the fight, and he quickly heads to the scene to break them up. He tries to release the evil that lives inside him, but can't seem to control it. The ball explodes and the reporter's head is on fire. During this incident, the crowd loses their minds, a grandmother rips her shirt and a child utters profanities. Nicky and Cassius come to the conclusion that the best way to resolve the disagreement is to play a game of basketball. In the end, Nicky wins, who hands Cassius a flask. Cassius, dying of thirst, takes a sip from the flask, unaware that something sinister is going on. After a minute, the flask eats him and seals him from the inside. When they get back to Nicky's apartment, he tries to impress his long-haired buddies, Nicky's roommate, and Mr. Beefy with his magical talents. Nicky then reflects on Valerie and the time they spent together recently. He decides to pull himself together and go to her to apologize. Nicky climbs the stairs to Valerie's room. The girl, stunned by his sudden appearance, uses pepper spray on him, causing him to fall. Nicky manages to survive thanks to the fact that he can fly. Nicky returns to Valerie and explains to her what happened. After that, they go to the city to spend time together and socialize there. The next day, Nicky's picture is published in all the newspapers. At this point, everyone in town starts attacking him because they think he's a bad person, and they're all wrong. The truth is that Adrian impersonated him to undermine his credibility in the community. When Nicky finally returns to his apartment, he approaches his neighbor and asks him to kill him so he can communicate directly with his father. Upon arrival, Nicky encounters his father's body, which is in the process of decomposition. This gives Nicky even more incentive to return to Earth and defeat his brother to save his father. At this point, the two men with long hair betray Nicky. They point Adrian, posing as the police chief, to a portal to hell to find Nicky there. Adrian then kidnaps the girl as well as Mr. Beefy, who were waiting for their demonic friend to arrive. At this time, one of the men with long hair offers Adrian a drink from his flask. Adrian, being the smartest, comes to the conclusion that Nicky has possessed the body of one of the long-haired men. When Nicky reveals himself, Adrian forces him to drink from the flask, but he refuses. Valerie, on the other hand, has been following them, and Adrian uses her as bait to force Nicky to drink from the flask. Adrian warns Nicky that otherwise the girl will die. Just as he was about to take a sip, Mr. Beefy intervenes and fires an arrow at Adrian. Despite this, Adrian picks the girl up in his arms and jumps in front of the approaching train. Nicky pounces on Valerie and saves her, but he and his brother Adrian are killed in the process. Nicky goes to heaven where he is greeted by 3 angels. To his surprise, one of them turns out to be Holly, his mother. Meanwhile, Adrian returns to hell, where he discovers that his father has transformed into something more than a mouth and 2 hands. Concluding that he can sit on a throne, Adrian decides to invade Earth to torment humans and steal their souls. Nicky's mother urges him to fight Adrian with his inner light, a gift he received from her. Nicky returns to Earth with his mother's sphere of light to save the human race from extinction. Nicky manages to escape an army of demons by scaring them away with butterflies and rabbits and feeding them fried chicken. When Nicky finally finds Adrian, he tries to solve the problem by turning the objects around them into innocent things, but Adrian turns them into something evil. Afterward, Adrian and Nicky begin wrestling each other inside the flask. Soon after, Nicky comes out of the flask and Valerie approaches him to kiss him. On the other hand, it quickly becomes clear that Adrian has really taken on Nicky's appearance and is fooling everyone. Afterward, Adrian turns into a bat. Valerie advises Nicky, who is still in the flask, to turn into a butterfly to free himself. The strategy works and Nicky manages to get out alive. He then uses the orb of light to free a man named Ozzy. Ozzy mercilessly eats the bat and then places it in a flask. Now Nicky must go back to hell and rescue his father before he vaporizes into thin air. Valerie kills Nicky, and when he returns to hell, his father greets him with a hug. After an emotional dialogue, the father lets Nicky go back to Earth. Satan then inserts a flask into Hitler's ass to punish him for all his sins. The movie ends with Valerie and Nicky living together with their son, who is openly breathing fire. Valerie also hits Nicky in the face with a shovel, bringing his jaw back to normal. Mr. Beefy, on the other hand, marries the love of his life, a rat. And the Guardian of Hell, on the other hand, marries Chewbacca. Satan and Holly tried to date but couldn't be together. Unfortunately for the two long-haired men, they died in a plane crash, but are now in hell, in Nicky's room. This is the end of the movie. Thank you all for watching this video to the end. Give this video a like. Write in the comments what you think about this movie, and see you in new videos.